were crazy with it, like unpredictable. Like he would be fine, and then some random person would walk by, and then it was actually with females too. It wasn't just directed at men. So
Right.
that's what scared me. And then what really I think spiked us to go and seek somebody is I was at the bus stop with the kids, and he's great with everybody. He knows at the bus stop he loves the kids.
Right.
And a guy was walking down the road, and he was wagging his little tail. We were sitting on the ground because it was a nice day.
Right.
He was laying down. He was in like a nice, settled stance, and his little nubble was going. And then as soon as the guy turned to come up the court and walk in front of me, he just went nuts.
He launched.
And he pulled me across the road and tried to get to him, and I was like trying to grab him and like hold him back, and he had never done anything like that, and it scared me really bad.
Okay. Like, what equipment was he wearing when that happened?
He wears his prong collar all the time, usually.
All right, so when you take him out, he's wearing a prong collar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I run with him I have a belt, and he's always got the prong collar on him.
Okay, so you're wearing he's attached to your belt. Yep. Please do me a favor and don't ever do that again. Okay, that's a great way to get really hurt.
Okay.
I know these things are super popular.
Yeah.
I'm a big old fat thing. I used to run years ago before I realized that I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And the thing is in a situation where you have something like that attached to you, you are at its whim. You can be easily victimized just by stumbling accidentally or something like that, or the dog going, oh, look, a squirrel, and off you go. Right, training mitigates a lot of that, but you really want the freedom to be able to drop the leash.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you say not the belt, not the prong collar.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, the belt. I don't care about the prong collar. I care about the belt. I don't want you hurt. Right? No. I don't have any. I use e-collars. I use prong. I have no problems with equipment whatsoever.
He's just so strong, and that's why we started with the prong collar, because like he can walk him and he can like get him to listen, but with me, I have shoulder issues, so when he would take off and he would pull, I'm going with him.
Okay.
The prong collar definitely has helped.
It helps a lot. Yeah. I know. So then you contacted Blue Line, and you went there, and they said what?
They said they wanted to see both of us walk him in different scenarios, and they brought a guy out that he didn't know, and she watched him walk him, and then she watched me walk him. Well, of course, because again, I'm nervous that he's going to bite somebody. When I walk him, I guess, and I didn't even realize it, I give him a little jerk.
Okay.
And I didn't even know that I was doing it. And they pointed that out. And they're like, well, you are tensing up.
You're facilitating that.
Jerk, which is triggering him to feel that you're threatened. And he's going to feel threatened because you're feeling threatened, basically. So she had me try to start walking him without like trying to ease myself. And I really do feel like that helped a lot. Like, because I was more aware of what I was doing then. So I would she told us to get him in a sit stance, right? Like to have him sit when somebody was coming past, which is not feasible because I walked.
Well, it also helps facilitate that defensive aggression because now the dog's going, yeah, we don't do that. So
and I said, I'm like, I walk him in the morning when the kids get on bus. There is so many children because most of the kids walk to school, so there's so many kids walking by. I'm like, I'm not going to sit there and make him sit every time somebody walks by.
Okay.
So I just became more aware of my, I guess, perception on how he was acting. And he was really good for the longest time. We had zero issues for a while there because I stopped reacting as much. And I would just move out of the way or let people pass. And we would just continue about our way. And I wouldn't stop and yank him or anything like that. And he did really, really well for a while. But then there's just random times where he catches me off guard. Like I was a couple weeks ago picking up his poop. And he hasn't gone after anybody. He hasn't acted like that for a long time. And I had my back turned for a second. Some guy was walking by that had like one of those fuzzy hoods up. And then he was just like, meow, and grabbed at his pant leg. And I'm like, what the heck?
Right. So that was out here.
So this was by the school.
By the school. Okay. So, and he was off leash or he was
on leash, still on my belt.
Okay.
Because I always have them on my belt in the morning.
Okay. So you were just kind of distracted and this guy got a little too close.
Yeah. But I hadn't even been holding him back or anything because again, he's been really, really good for the longest time.
How close was this guy to you when this happened?
I mean, on the sidewalk.
Okay, so he could have avoided you had he thought about it.
Yes.
Okay.
He could have definitely walked around us, but he continued walking straight and walked right past Wilson, and I guess that is why he reacted. And plus, I don't know if maybe the hood.
Oh yeah, because he couldn't see him, and he's like, so he was grabbing. All right, so. The guy's walking by. Did Wilson grab him from behind or was it from the front?
I think it was from the front.
It's usually from the side, like
Like
right
the
when
side.
you
Yeah,
get
so,
in line
yeah.
with
Like
him is
right
Right.
when he
he'll-
was next to me.
Okay, because that's defense. That's
Yeah.
not offense. That's still defense.
Yeah.
Because it's. I'm going to say it's kind of a chicken shit thing to do.
Yeah.
We call them ABCs, right? They're members of the Ass Biters Club. And the thing, the ABC dogs, and basically it's because because dogs they're funny that way. It's like you hear the term resting bitch face all the
Yeah.
time, right? So with dogs, that's kind of the thing. They do this RBF like.
Yep.
And with that fuzzy face, and he's thinking, I know you see me, but you're ignoring me. So I'm going to let you know right now that you can't do that. And the thing is he's waiting for the moment where this person is almost passed by.
Yeah.
If it was offensive aggression, he'd have jumped out in front of him and drove him back.
Yeah.
What he's doing is he's waiting for them to get just abreast of him or slightly forward to say, I told you to leave me alone,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, and that's all predicated on fear and suspicion.
Yeah.
So
And he
it's
very much takes social cues from me, because I've noticed now if I address somebody and I have that high pitched voice and I'm like, because people will literally because we're walking in the morning and there's people all walking by, and if somebody comes up to me and they're like, oh, can I pet my, I'm like, oh my goodness, hello, and they, like try to do my high pitched voice and his little knuckles going and he's all excited. Some lady the other day was loving all over him. He was totally fine, but it's like those moments where I don't like engage with somebody, he's more suspicious of them as they're walking
right.
past.
And that's perfectly appropriate. That's the sign of a keenly intelligent dog. But here's the thing. Part of the process is not giving him mixed signals, right? One person being okay and another person not being okay. Nobody's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody. So when people want to pet him because he's cute and he's fluffy and they want to touch the cute fluffy dog, say no, he's in training and we're teaching him how to be more respectful around strangers or whatever. Kids don't need to touch your dog. It's just like you and I, we're women, and the kind of inappropriate attention you've received throughout your life by people that you don't want that attention by. And anything that you socially would perceive as being inappropriate for you, you can be assured your dog feels the same way. And it's really, really important for humans to understand that, because we put a lot on dogs. We make them expect, or we make them tolerate a lot of behaviors that we ourselves will never tolerate.
Yeah.
So it's important to be mindful of his cues as well. And the thing is it's like, that's not an endorsement, because he's not allowed to threaten people. But by the same token, we can absolutely teach him how not to feel threatened by people, because that's the issue, right? So now with the hunting, you're out in the woods or in the fields, and it's just you and him and maybe a couple of the people and a couple of the dogs, and you're doing things that he enjoys. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of like, yeah, man, this is my heaven. This is nirvana. I don't need to worry about all the stresses. It's like coming home from work. Gosh, man, it's a rotten day. And slinging a couple back and, not watching the evening news, right, to get your head back. And it's the same thing. Our dogs do take a lot of social cues from us. And so, and a lot of it, part of it is being mindfulness of what we're doing and where we're at, being situationally aware, right? So it's like you're in a park, a public place, you're on a sidewalk. The sidewalk itself is the first cue that there could be possibilities for traffic, right? Move off the sidewalk, right? But by the same token, if you're in motion and the world is in motion, you need to stay in motion. When you sit there and allow the dog to fester and ooze, you're actually reinforcing that defensive, resentful behavior.
So now what I do is I usually tell him to heel next to me as we're running. So when we go past somebody, just because again, I don't want to be pulling on him the whole time and then giving him the wrong cue that I'm like nervous. So now I'm just, I kind of just bring him a little bit closer, just gently, and I'm like, heel. And I just tell him to heel as I'm running past somebody. And, he'll kind of turn his head a little bit and I'll yell at him. I'll say, heel. And then he'll usually direct his attention back forward again.
Okay, well, I'm going to teach you how not to do any of those things. Okay. All right, so now we're 11, 12 months old. Right? Now we're 11, 12 months old. We have an established behavioral history of him being defensive in certain circumstances.
Yes.
Okay.
Mostly with me.
All right, so mostly with you, but it has occurred with you as well. Tell me about those incidences.
So a couple of them that shocked me were at the second Smith clinic that we went to, the intermediate clinic.
How long ago was that?
That would have been probably close to 9 months ago, 10 months ago.
Okay.
So spring 2023.
Okay.
We were walking up and this was after him being on a chain gang all day and clearly stressed and being the last dog to settle down. We walked up for his turn to do a run, and I had him on command lead, heeling next to me, and somebody came up behind us, and he turned around and like barked and snarled at him, but corrected, and he focused back onto what we were doing. He
Okay.
was also lunging at people from the chain gang if they got too close.
They'd go and get their dog, and he'd be like, "You're too close to me." Okay.
Right.
All right. So then at one point in time, you met up with Nate and Gretchen.
Yes.
And how long ago was that?
So that would have been summer 2023.
The same, shortly after that.
Right. Because I was like, all right, well, the seminar platform isn't really working for us. I got to get his mind straight before we even try to figure this stuff out. So I need to, we're missing something in his training or somewhere. So I got with Nate. We did a phone call. We did in-person evaluation, and then I started.
He came here, or you went down to Baltimore Dog Wars?
Baltimore.
Okay.
Everything with him has been down in Baltimore. I did go to one of his NAVDIC classes, but he wasn't, there to train Wilson. We just went down.
Right. How many lessons did you have with Nate?
We did 3.
And what were the things that you covered with Nate?
So the first thing we did was just basically he hooked him to one of the things in the floor, and we had a conversation about what's been going on, kind of like we are now.
Okay.
So that was the evaluation. Let him settle down. We did some basic, just to see how he acted with me. And then we went to the next class or lesson, and he started having us put him in a heel. And then Nate would walk by and get closer and closer. And as long as if he moved a paw off of heel, pick him up, set him back down.
That's stand.
Right.
Were you moving? Yeah. Okay. Same thing. Whoa is stand.
Yeah.
But yeah, you weren't moving. You were stationary.
Right.
Okay.
So then he would kind of increase the distance, and if he walked by and Wilson stayed in whoa, yes.
And pay him off.
Treat him, and then bring him back around, put him on the line, and he'd have Gretchen come,
right
out of the door at the end of the thing and come walk by and stand next to him while he's in whoa. If he didn't move while she just stood there.
Right.
Okay. And then he started doing other things while he was on whoa, like, making loud noises, banging stuff around.
Okay.
And every time he didn't move, yes. And then treat him. And
right. So there was no precursor to that. There was no preamble, no working on refining obedience for stay for any of the other stationary commands or anything. It was just, we're going right to the stand stay and approach by a neutral stranger. Okay. And so that was
lesson 1.
Okay.
So I took that, went a couple weeks, and I would go up to the Mom Pa Trail, and I would do the same exercise with just tons of people going by all day long. If you work at the community side, you see that there's people running there, strollers, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Did the same thing. And then I would sit on a bench, have him lay down next to me and just do nothing.
Okay.
Let people go by. And then get up, walk, do the whoa every time somebody would come by, and then sit at the next bench, do nothing. And it was fantastic. Not a single even glimpse of an issue doing that.
Okay.
So then did that for several weeks, and that's when our walks were less stressful. He didn't really have any issues. So then we started doing box work was the next lesson, where I got a box and start putting food in it, and as long as he keeps
in the popo. Okay.
As long as he kept his head in the box, he kept getting food. And I guess that was the intention there, was to have him be less concerned about his surroundings and more focused on us. So I did that for a while, but I didn't really.
It doesn't transfer.
Yeah, I wasn't getting it. It didn't seem to do much.
Okay.
So then I talked to
because he's not not foodie, so you were having to limit his food in order to make it attractive for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Care less.
Okay. So all right.
So right about then, I think, is when September came, hunting season started. They were busy, I was busy, and then they moved, so we just kind of haven't revisited it.
Right.
But I think we were on some kind of right track, maybe, but
well, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of pieces that are missing. And the thing is there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be done that's going to help facilitate everything that's wrong, right? So the dog has a fairly a reasonable amount of obedience. And I say that because I've never seen his obedience. I'm just going on what you're telling me, right? Well, he's not. And you know why he's not? Because he's still launching at people.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That's not obedient.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing people want to do is separate behavior from obedience. You can't. You simply can't. Behavior is what a dog's doing. Obedience is what a dog knows. So we use one in order to impact the other, or one tells us whether or not we can impact the other. So in a situation where you have a dog who's so willing to engage in at-risk behaviors, we have to really go back quite a ways. And one of the things when you're talking about, we call it the approach by a neutral stranger, is the stand command out of the AKC novice, which was written back in 10,000 years ago. But whoa, stand, it's all the same thing. Put yourself there, don't frickin' move, right? So what was the correction for failure? Picking the dog up and setting him back.
Right.
Okay, so in a situation without all of the preamble that's supposed to happen before that event, what the dog is learning is, I know I'm not supposed to stay, I know I'm not supposed to leave, but I have a serious amount of pressure because I don't like this. There has to be validation as to why the dog needs to stand there, right? So it's not so much the physical act of picking them up and putting them down, right? The physical act, the correction for a failure to stay is always done the exact same way. That's a correction for a failure to stand, stay. This is fine. But the thing is what has to happen is there's a couple of very tiny, minute, critical moments that occur before the dog moves, where you can avert any movement at all simply by moving or simply by responding in an appropriate way. And I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I have thousands of videos that prove my point. Dog standing there, person is approaching, dog looks and goes forward. What happens is instead of picking the dog up and correcting him for a failure to stand, we're simply departing while that person stops moving. The dog is moving towards that because the dog is thinking, I can vanquish my foes. I can make you move. And when the dog realizes that he's the one that moves, he's like, well, that kind of sucked. It didn't work out the way I had planned. So let's kind of sit here and see what happens. When dogs acquire information, how do they acquire information? Through their eyes and through their nose first, right? So when the person is moving, that person, whoever is approaching, the neutral stranger, when that person is moving, it automatically puts the dog in defense. The reason that we use stand, we start with a sit. The reason we use stand is because that's the one thing that actually puts the dog in defense or offense right away. So that's fight, freeze, or flee. We know he ain't going to run away. He's already proved to us he's not willing to run away. He's more than happy to fight. So we have to kind of teach him to freeze, right? And that's counterintuitive for almost 100% of all dogs because they're not turn the other cheekers, right? They don't sit there and say, well, I guess I'll just try harder, right? They have to be made to understand that there is no threat to them. There is no reason that they need to oppose what's going to happen next. You can't do that with a correction. You simply cannot. You have to help the dog understand how to do this on his own. If every time the dog is forced to depart, the dog's going to go, well, I didn't want to move. I wanted to kind of see what happened next, right? Then over time, attrition teaches the dog, if I just stand here, nothing bad happens. Yeah. Right? The whole, and this is the basic rudiments of all training. The very foundation. It is the floor under which your house, or on top of which your house is built. And basically what we're trying to do is help the dog understand these are no longer suggestions. These are demands. You're not allowed to move. So almost 100% of his problem is the fact that he has never been taken to a level of obedience where he understands whoa means don't frickin' move, right? Heel means heel. And I mean, the Wonder Lead's a great tool. We don't use these tools simply because they are not practical for the average owner. And we have to think in terms of average owner behavior first before we think NAVDA and field work and all that other stuff. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because he lives in a community of humans. He doesn't live out in the woods with your hunting buddies and their dogs while you guys go looking for birds and game, right? So what we need to do is help them to be a little bit more respectful, cooperative animal in this environment. And basically that actually does transfer.
Sure.
Okay.
And that absolutely makes sense, because there's, so go back to the Smith seminar, where one of their things is a pretty, I can't think of the word, but a very strict heel.
Yeah.
So he almost needs to like constantly be reminded.
And he shouldn't have to be.
And so Ronnie Smith was handling him with the command lead and trying to get him in a heel, and he just kept saying, "Man, I still don't have your attention. I still don't have your attention." And it would just be, this constant reminder.
Right.
So there's definitely, that's why I was saying I think we had to go back to basics.
You absolutely have to go back to basics. There is no escaping that. And the thing is back to basics is back to basics. I have brought a dog with me, my English pointer. He's in my truck freezing his butt off right now because it's 22 degrees outside. But you know what? He wanted to come, so hey. And he's a very young dog. He's younger than your dog, and he has, we work him. I mean, he's e-collar conditioned. He's, he's had a lot of training. He's not perfect. He's nowhere near as good as any of my previous pointers in a lot of ways, but he's just top end in many other ways, which is the only reason I keep the little bastard around. I'm sorry, I didn't say that out loud, did I? But and, he's a really nice dog. He's very nice. We're going through the force fetch process right now with him. But basically, I brought him along because the one thing I want to show you is, although this dog keeks at everything. Yeah. There's a bird, there's a this, there's a that. Blah, 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 blah. He's antisocial, one. He's not great around strangers. So we have kind of a similar situation there. But basically what I'm going to demonstrate for you is how we actually control that through obedience, right? So whether or not he's going to permit you to touch him, I mean, he's not going to bite anybody. But I mean, he's the same thing. He gets defensive and he gets growly and he gets super sus. So what we're going to do is walk through how that looks, how that's supposed to look, in order for the dog to understand that he has nothing to fear and everything I want to happen gets to happen first, right? And this is the overarching element to all obedience. It's not about I have you under my thumb, because this dog is as animated and as stupid as, he's an English pointer. I mean, come on. They're not Mensa candidates, okay? They find birds, that's all they do. But basically he understands very quickly that if I simply do these things that I'm demanded to do, everything I want to happen happens for me, right? I don't give my dog a bunch of leash checks. I don't use my hands at all. And the reason why, there's a variety of reasons why, but one, it's in their periphery. They see my hands animate, they know what's happening next. They're not learning anything. They're relying on the cues that I supply. What I want them to do is remember what their job is and figure that crap out on their own, right? That's when you get the dog going from dithering to going, okay, I'm paying attention, right? And you don't have to say a word.
Complicated with that because he will remove himself from a situation as well. So like,
right. But the thing is, though, is he's still super scopy. He's around looking around. What's his job?
Our younger son, he does not like. He's very like on guard with him just because he's loud and he stepped on him all the time. So as soon as he enters a room, especially like I said, wind down time at night is usually where
I remember you telling me he just departs. He leaves.
He will growl as soon as Hunter enters a room, and he will walk himself and put himself in the cage to get away from him.
Okay, and that's fine, but he doesn't have the option of being able to do that when you're at the bus stop waiting for the kids to get picked up. No. These are the things that I'm talking about, right? Obedience is absolute. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. So he doesn't get to select when he applies obedience. Yeah. Okay? The point is, he needs to understand this is something that's expected of me all the time. And I use this correlation with people all the time. How many years did it take for you to finish school?
18.
First person in a decade that has actually given me a correct answer, right? Honest to God. Well, my graduate degree with da-da-da-da-da. No, honey, let's talk about pre-K. Let's talk about elementary school. Let's talk about all those things. It takes a lifetime, right? So, the 80-20 rule, we spend all this time learning before we actually spend any time doing, right? And if we are intermittently reinforced for things like I love food, So that's why I'm fat. I eat the wrong foods, right? I'm basically a fairly lazy person. I will think my way through a problem before I physically make my way through a problem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So and your dog is the same way. If this works for me here,
Right.
I'm going to continue to attempt to try this elsewhere because this is easy for me, right? So I'm going to see if I can make it easy for me elsewhere, right? That doesn't work. Okay. So here in the house, when your son comes down and he's like, oh, here we go, he can extract himself, but in life he can't, right? And every dog should have a safe zone. But basically what needs to happen is he needs to be, I have to be time conscious because I have a conference call at 10 o'clock and I know I'm going to be late for it. If he's in a situation where he basically is under the impression that he's allowed to escape consequences for failure, you can be assured he's going to continue to practice that. And that's why we're continuing to see this behavior. One, absolute adherence to obedience, something you can enforce. And these are rules that are not necessarily things that people want to employ because it requires effort and it requires planning. It requires a strategy. But in the interim, until we can get him to start making better decisions cognitively, these are the things that are going to have to happen. Crate confinement when you can't be present, leash and collar management when you are. And that's all there is to it until he starts learning how to make better choices. And we're practicing obedience. Now, as a field dog, does he have a down command?
Like to lay down?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Does he have a stay command?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to be employing things like that when he's in the house. What Hunter's going to have to learn is slow his roll, don't agitate the frickin' dog, ignore him when he's in the room. And what the dog has to learn is when Hunter enters the room, he's not allowed to escape. He has to learn by being there.
What I've started doing is I put a thing of treats on the corner of the counter, and every time Hunter comes in, I'm like,
but that's not solving the problem. All that's doing is helping reinforce the dog that I can make these people give me food, right? Here's the thing. I love food. I use food all the time. I don't like the way people are taught to use food because it's really inappropriate. The dog is working for the food. The dog is not working for the item. And again, because he's not foodie to begin with, you're trying to motivate him with something he doesn't really care that much about.
See, and that's what's so frustrating because even everything I was reading on the resource guarding that he's been doing with the bed and the couches, it said that you want them to growl because then you don't get the fight, and then you give them the food to redirect their attention.
No, none of those things. Do me a favor. Don't make yourself insane by reading crap on the internet, okay? Resource guarding behavior is handled one way and one way only. Don't create a conflict. Period. End of discussion. If you're sitting at your your favorite restaurant and you're getting ready to eat your favorite food and someone walks by and snatches something off your plate, what are you going to do? You're gonna be pissed. I'm gonna stab you in the face with a fork. Okay? Don't come between me and my food. The thing with dogs is resource guarding is something that actually occurs from the time they're infants. Right? It's the first social behavior that you can witness in a litter of puppies. How old do you think they are when that happens?
3 weeks.
Wrong. Birth. Wow. They're swimming for the biggest booby, right? I mean, they're making an effort to get to the best resource of warmth and food, right? When they become aware, they actually start interfighting, but that is present from the moment they're born, right? So when it comes to resources, the easiest way to stop creating conflict, super simple answer, remove the resources, right? So multiple dogs, you're always going to have competition, always. And even though he's kind of, he's this little tiny thing and he's this big giant thing, they're always going to be in competition for resources. Nobody's allowed on the furniture. Nobody. Because if you don't know how to control yourself, you don't get access to that resource, right? This is the king and queen seat. This is where the humans sit. If you want company, it's by invitation. You're not allowed up here unless I tell you can come up here. And you have to leave the minute I tell you to depart. And you have to go to where I tell you have to go to, right? So, and there's a whole bunch of different devices. I mean, I would imagine that he's collar conditioned. You can use an e-collar to get him to understand that place or kennel, whatever the command is that you were taught. Go over there. I don't want you on me. I'm not wearing you like a blanket. Get off. Go away. Same with this one. There's no reason that he can't undergo training also, simply because it's just, how many kids do you have?
2.
All right. So do they fight?
Oh yeah.
All right. They usually fight over resources, don't they?
Yeah.
Think about it.
You're a resource.
Okay, you're a resource. You're access to resources, right? You are access to resources. And then one child thinks, oh, well, I never get to do what, Hunter does or whatever. So you have this competition for attention, which is also a resource, right? So you have to think in terms of how you control that behavior. Separate. Go to your respective corner and shut up, right? It's the same with the dogs. And in a situation where you have two dogs, you don't have a one dog problem, you have a two dog problem. And although he's not a big problem, he's still enough of a problem to where his treatment and behavior is always going to be different than his.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, Wilson will let him climb all over him and
Bite him
and pin him to the ground on his back.
Well, play is different than that, right? So, I mean, play is not a problem, but basically it's like, when it comes to actual resources, if there is not more resources than there are dogs, you're always going to have conflict. Always.
Individually, they both guard us too, which is not
good. And that can't be. So he's, collect all of his attention when we first walked in, right? That's very telling. So, and this guy, he's super happy and people-y and all that. This guy sees that and he's like, I kind of want to do that, but my inner dog is telling me that I don't really like that.
Yeah.
And then when I do it, I feel conflicted, and that's when I get tense, and that's when I become defensive, right?
Wow,
so
that was a pretty serious thing you said right there.
Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
Right, because he wants to. When we walked in, he's sitting there and he's like, I want to kill you. I want to be friends. I want to kill you. I want to be friends. He was conflicted. He was very conflicted, which is why I had you remove him, because I didn't want him to feel conflict. That's the important thing. Okay. Let me see if I can redirect this call.
I don't want to be nice.
Right. Let me see if I can redirect this call.